guys, and welcome to the show that you've all been waiting for, and that is Grade 10 Life Science today on Learn Extra Live. This is Eugen, and I'm of course Katleho. Boy, have I missed you guys. Haven't you missed them?
Sure, it's feeling nice to be back in studio.
It is really nice to be back in studio. So what are we going to be doing today?
Well, today's going to be the first lesson of Grade 10s, and we're going to do the introduction and the pillar for Grade 10, 11, and 12. So we're going to spend lots of time doing the chemistry of life. Yeah, so we're going to have lots of fun. I hope that the guys out there are going to ask lots of questions, and this is going to be an important chapter for the rest of the year.
Thank you again. You can go prepare that full lesson. So guys, of course, this is the first Grade 10 Life Science lesson. You were Grade 9s last year. You're now Grade 10s. You guys have come a long way. I know you've been dying to be on Learn Extra Live with us. So make sure that you join us on the page, guys. That is www.facebook.com/LearnExtra. And our Twitter handle is @LearnExtra. Guys, today we want you to be enthusiastic. Ask anything that you need to ask, guys. We are here for you 100%. You know we are. So join us on this page. We also have an awesome new updated website. So I will put it up on the page, but I'll give it to you now. That's www.mindset.co.za/learn/extra and /live. Go check it out, guys. There's awesome notes. There's awesome videos and interactions for you guys. So stay put there, guys. There's also schedules for when our shows will be. Just be there, guys. Just be with us today, because I'm really excited to be with you guys. So join us. And if your friends aren't here yet, call them and tell them to join us right this instant. Over to you again.
Thanks, Katleko. Guys, we're going to have awesome time this year. The best time to tune in is after school on a Wednesday afternoon when we do life sciences. So we've got the Grade 10 lessons in the afternoon from 4 to 5, and then we have Grade 11s and 12. But for you guys that are in Grade 10, you've got to remember that this is your first year of life sciences. And essentially we try and do, during this first session, we try and do what we call the chemistry of life, which forms the basis of biology, or life sciences, so to call it. So we're going to spend lots of time today doing understanding what chemistry of life is, understanding what organic and inorganic molecules are, so that when we go on to the next chapters, when we talk of cells, we understand what cells are made up of. When we get into Grade 12, when we talk of DNA and RNA, we understand exactly what DNA is. Or if we talk of carbohydrates, we should know what carbohydrates. So essentially this is very important. So you're going to spend lots of time doing this. We're going to go through today, we're going to discuss the organic compounds as well as the inorganic compounds before we get on to doing some nice food tests next week. So next week, Katleko, we're going to do lots of food tests. We're going to do lots of practice. So you guys must tune in. And so we're going to have lots of fun next week. So let's get on to what we've got to do for today. So we're looking at chemistry of life. And often when guys hear chemistry, or when you guys hear chemistry, go, oh no, this is going to be a chemistry lesson. No, guys, this is going to be about the chemistry of life of biological modules. So we're going to look at not the details of chemistry, but understanding the chemistry of molecules in terms of when we talk of a protein, whether it's an inorganic molecule or an organic molecule. So let's look at what we have today. Right, so during this lesson, we're going to investigate the structures and functions of molecules that are essential for life. So today we're going to look at the essential molecules of life. During this lesson, we're going to look at the terminology, and that important terminology is we often come across words such as molecules, and we come across words such as atoms. So let's look at what an atom is, or what an element is. So today, a molecule is a chemical structure made up of atoms. So when we look at atoms, it's basically several atoms put together that give us a molecule. We often hear of the word a compound. And basically a compound is a chemical substance that is made up of two or more elements. Now guys, during your Grade 9 year, you looked at the periodic table and you looked at the various elements. During this chapter, we're going to look at how those elements are put together to give you compounds. And essentially, if you think about water, H2O. H2O is made up of elements. So we're looking at how those elements come together to give you biological compounds. And that's essentially what we're looking at today. So here we have a diagram that shows you the relationship between elements and atoms, compounds and molecules. Now, if I were to ask you this and you were in my class, what would be the bigger between these two? What would be a larger molecule? And we know that an atom is obviously very small. So we learnt about the structure of an atom in Grade 9, and we know that atoms are much smaller. And atoms make up elements. So we see that there's a relationship between atoms put together forming elements. We also know that atoms make up molecules, and we get molecules that are made up of atoms. What we want to see today is the relationship between a molecule and a biological compound. So by that we refer to looking at simple molecules being put together to give you complex compounds or simple compounds. And that's essentially what we're going to discuss during today's lesson. Okay, so when we look at molecules in a human body or in a plant, we can classify them into two main groups. We can look at compounds as organic or as inorganic. Now, we often hear of the term organic substances. Now, essentially, how would you differentiate between an organic substance and an inorganic substance? Now, I challenged my learners, and so they came up with definitions like they contain carbon and they contain hydrogen, or they're held together with hydrogen bonds. So let's look at that, because we also have some inorganic compounds that contain hydrogen and even contain carbon. So we cannot use that statement to say that all organic compounds contain only carbon and that inorganic compounds do not contain carbon, because there are inorganic compounds that do contain carbon. Let's look at how we unpack the difference between inorganic compounds and organic compounds. So essentially, an inorganic compound, these are compounds made by a natural geophysical process. So they're naturally made. They're not produced through a biological process. They're naturally made in the environment. They form in living organisms as part of metabolism. So they could be formed in a living organism as part of a metabolic process, and that's accepted. So common examples of inorganic compounds are water, carbon dioxide, oxygen, sulfur dioxide, as well as sodium chloride, and the list can go on. Essentially, if we look at these inorganic compounds, we see that they have hydrogen, they have oxygen, they have carbon, and they have the other elements. When we look at organic compounds and what differentiates them from inorganic compounds, we would see that there's the presence of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and some of the other essential elements. So let's look at the definition of an organic compound. So an organic compound is a compound that is made through a chemical reaction in a living organisms. And that's very important, guys. Organic molecules are produced through a biological process. So if we think of biological processes, we refer to photosynthesis and we refer to respiration. We know that plants carry out photosynthesis. That is a biological process. And they have the ability to take the elements, so we talk of water and we talk of carbon dioxide, and put that into a biological compound. And by that we refer to that as a physiological process. So the carbohydrates or the sugars made by plants are an example of organic molecules. And essentially we say they're organic because they've been produced through a chemical process in a living organism. Okay. They are nutrients and energy sources. If you look at the bulk of our food, and all our food actually, they are organic compounds. Essentially they are made through a biological process. Either it's made in a plant or it's made in an animal, and we consume these organic molecules. And they provide us with energy and they provide us with nutrition. And that's essentially how a cell will survive, or our body survive. And that's why we refer to this chapter as the chemistry of life, understanding and unpacking the chemistry behind the molecules that are important for life. They must contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. Some may contain nitrogen, sulfur, and phosphorus. So when we look at our organic compounds, we see that they contain carbon, as I said here, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and sometimes sulfur and phosphorus. So essentially, an organic compound will contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and the other elements, as opposed to an inorganic compound, which is not made through a biological process, as it is made through a geophysical process or a process not biological, and hence that would differentiate the two. Let's look at some examples of organic compounds that you will look at during this year. So we often hear of the word carbohydrates. Okay, or we often hear of people talking of a high carb diet or a low carb diet. Proteins, we know proteins are very important in our diet. We talk of fats, we talk of nucleic acids, and we're going to look at vitamins as well. So these 5 compounds are your organic compounds, and these organic compounds form the basis of living organisms. They're important for nutrition, they're important to sustain human and animal life. So let's go on to we're going to look at the inorganic compounds today, and the first compound we're going to look at is water. And we know that water is essential for life, and when you look at the structure of water, guys, water is an H2O molecule compound, and it has 2 hydrogen atoms and an oxygen atom. If we were to draw a simple structure of a water molecule, you'll find that it has two hydrogen atoms. So that's two hydrogen atoms and a an oxygen molecule, H2O. So let's look at the role of water or its importance. We said that water makes up 70% of our body, and we know that what is essentially important for us, we don't have water, we dehydrate. Water is also the main component of our blood and body fluids. A large percentage of blood is actually water, and the body fluid that we have in our body surrounding the cells and tissue is essentially made up of water. So if we talk of tissue fluid, the composition of tissue fluid is water. So water plays a very important role in our bodies. Water is also important in dissolving other chemicals in our body, and it allows for chemical reactions to take place. So we refer to water as a universal solvent in which other substances can dissolve or other solutes can dissolve. So in our body, water forms the basis of all chemical reactions. So it's a medium in which chemical reactions take place. So if we don't have water, we will not be able to break down substances, neither will we be able to build up substances. So water plays a very important role in the chemical reactions in our body, and we refer to those chemical reactions as metabolism. Okay. Water also plays an important role in removing the waste products from our body. So urea, sweat are all made through water. So you have uric acid dissolved in water, you have your waste products that all are passed out through water in our body. So when we excrete waste, lots of the waste contains water, and that's how the body flushes out the excess waste in our body. When we exhale carbon dioxide and water vapor. That's also water produced as a result of exhalation or respiration in our body, and that is to get rid of the excess carbon dioxide and to maintain the body constant or homeostasis. Water helps to regulate our body temperature. And guys, it's summer now. You know that we sweat a lot, Katleko, and you notice that often when you're driving in a car and you don't have your windows, you don't have an aircon on, but when you do put those windows down, you find that the wind actually cools you down. And that's because the sweat on your surface of the body are water droplets that actually cool down.
Okay.
So what happens is that your body cools down because of the sweat, the water droplets cooling down. So it may not play a significant role in us, but you'll find that in animals, this is an important mechanism of cooling and maintaining their body temperatures. So water plays a very important role in cooling the body and maintaining the correct temperature. Water is lost through urine, sweat, and must be replaced. And we know that we need to rehydrate ourselves, drink lots of water, and that is to maintain the body volume, the blood volume in our body, because if we don't, we dehydrate, and that's not good.
How many glasses of water should we be drinking?
Well, people say that we need to drink 4 liters of water a day. I think it's important to drink water all the time, and essentially to keep yourself hydrated. The body has a thirst mechanism, and you find that when you're thirsty, the body tells you that you need to drink water.
Yes.
Unfortunately, that is not a good practice. You need to drink water more often than when you feel thirsty, because feeling thirsty is a mechanism in the body to tell you that your body's lacking water, and that's not ideal. You should be drinking water not when you're thirsty, on a constant basis.
So your body should never lack water.
Yeah. The thirst sensation is the body telling you that your body is lacking water.
Okay.
Okay, and you'll notice that you feel less energetic when you're tired, and often a glass of water or two helps you re-energize. It reconstitutes your body blood volume, and that's important for you. Okay, so we're almost there for a break, Katleko, but I'm going to in a very quick nutshell, I'm going to go through the importance of water before we go in for a break. So we know that it is a universal solvent, guys. It is a transportation medium. You'll find that in plants and humans. In plants, water is needed to transport the nutrients from the soil to the leaves, and that's for photosynthesis. In humans, as we digest food and that's absorbed into the blood, it's transported to all parts of our body. It also forms a medium for chemical reactions, and we know that reactions in the body will not take place without water. In plants, guys, water gives plants shape. So plants do not have a skeletal system, and you'd see in a plant in summer, as soon as it gets by the afternoon, they start drooping, hanging, and that's because they've lost lots of water through transpiration. So plants rely on water to give them shape and turgidity, and turgidity is basically referring to being a cell being firm and having proper shape. And most important, water plays a very important role in the removal of waste products from our body. So we've looked at, in this session, we've looked at inorganic compounds. We've looked at the importance of one of the most important inorganic compounds, which is water. It's very important, guys. We're going to go in for a break. You guys should grab a glass of water, rehydrate yourselves, and we come back and we're going to look at the nutrients, which are also an example of your inorganic compounds. So let's go for a water break.
Thank you. Yeah, you heard you again. Go for a water break. No cool drink, no funny things. Just get water and get right back to your seats, because as you heard, it gets more awesome from here. See you just now. Welcome back, Mindsetters. If you have just joined us, we are currently doing grade 12, grade 10 Learn Extra Live Life Science. I hope you guys have joined us and you're now comfortable in your seats with your glasses of water, because I need your help, guys. You guys need to go to your teachers tomorrow, only the best teachers, of course, because we are looking for content from your teachers, guys. That's anything that your teachers have. So let them know that we need their content, and they can send it to content@mindset.co.za. Make sure that you go to them, run up to them and say, ma'am, sir, Mrs. whoever, Mr. whoever, please, Mindset needs your content. Send us through. Only your best teachers, though, okay? Your favorite teachers. We want their content. Over to you again.
Thanks, Katlego. Yeah, awesome, guys. The more resources we have, the better we can present to you guys. And I think it's important for us to share information. And sharing information is essentially important, because you never know what's out there. Probably better than what we have. And I know you guys are getting some good stuff. During the break, we had some questions that were posed. I know Amir was asking a question, and there was another person that also asked. And guys, that's what we want you. We want you guys to interact. So we had a question, and there's some doubt about the differentiation between organic and inorganic compounds. And I know this, often we tend to struggle, but okay, essentially, remember that organic molecules are made through a biological process. Inorganic molecules are made through a geophysical process. So they're not made in a living organism. Organic compounds contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, sometimes phosphorus and sulfur. Your inorganic compounds do not contain carbon. If they do, it is not through a biological process. An example would be carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide. Although they do contain carbon, they're not made through, they do not have hydrogen in them, and hence they're not inorganic. They're inorganic. So essentially that is how you would differentiate. I would call it a organic compound very simply a biological molecule made through a physiological process that contains carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. And I'll call an inorganic compound a compound made through a geophysical process that contains elements of the periodic table. Carbon may be present, but it lacks hydrogen. So we will continue with the inorganic compounds that we discussed before we went to break. So we discussed water as an example of an inorganic compound. We also have minerals, guys. Now, when we refer to minerals, we refer to elements that are found naturally, guys, in the environment. And these are needed by the body. They are called essential nutrients. So we depend on many of the essential nutrients from the environment that are supplemented through our diet, through eating different types of food, or we could now supplement them via taking supplements or nutrients. Now, essentially, when we look at nutrients, we can divide them into two groups. We can divide them into macronutrients, and we can divide them into micronutrients. Now, we will often hear the term macro and micro as we go through grade 10 and 11. You'll find that micro comes from the word microscopic, and hence micro will be quite simple. So it'll be a nutrient that is needed in smaller quantities, and some teachers refer to that as trace nutrients or trace elements. So they're needed in very small quantities. If we compare to your macronutrients, these are nutrients that are required in larger quantities. The body needs more of them, and hence we need larger quantities of them. And they play a very important role. The important role of minerals in our diet is very important. Minerals they play an important role in the chemical reactions in our body, maintaining our electoral balance. And often when you drink your different energy and your cool drinks and your supplementary drinks, you find that they contain the list of required daily allowances, and you'll list the minerals that are present in there. And some of the minerals are calcium, fluoride, magnesium, and things like that. So these are essential. We're going to look at some of them and the importance to us in our bodies. So we said that macronutrients are needed in larger quantities. So what I've done now, guys, is that I've tabulated these. I've listed them one below each other so that we can clearly look at them and see the source of a nutrient or a mineral. We're going to look at the source, we're going to look at its function and its deficiency. So when you're studying this, when you study any element, whether it's a mineral, a macronutrient, or a micronutrient, you've got to look at it from a point of what is the source of this mineral, what are its functions, and most importantly, what are the deficiencies that may result if this mineral is in insufficient quantity. And often you find that because of poor nutrition, in certain countries, you'll find certain diseases manifesting more easily. And it's important for us to understand this. And this often comes in terminology and in your multiple choice questions. So learn this section by looking at the diseases, the functions, and the source of the nutrient. So the first one we're looking at is calcium, guys. And calcium is very important, and you often hear of drinking your milk, and that's important because you know milk is an important source of calcium. You find that cheese, dairy products have lots of calcium. Egg is rich in calcium, and your green vegetables have high amounts of calcium. And I know sometimes we don't like our veggies, but you see how important they are.
They're really good
They're really
for you.
important because they're important for good, strong bone and teeth formation. And guys, if you want to smile and you only have strong bones, you got to make sure you have your calcium. Okay, let's look at the functions. They play a very important role, guys, in the clotting of blood. They also play an important role in muscle and nerve activities. So if you want to be active, if you want to have good reflexes, if you want to stay fit, you need to have lots of calcium in your diet because it's important in controlling muscle and nerve activities and ensuring that your muscles and nerves function optimally. What will result if we are deficient or we have a diet that is not supplemented well with calcium? Now, you'll find that rickets develops, and rickets is a condition that results in kids in poor bone development and weak bones. Osteoporosis as well, and as you age, you find that your bones become weak, and that is because the bone density decreases because of a lack of calcium. And often then you start taking supplements, some of your parents would be familiar with this term osteoporosis. It's weakening of the bones, and that can be prevented, or it can be treated by having a constant dosage of calcium in your diet or through medication. It could lead to prolonged bleeding, and that's because we see calcium playing an important role as a blood clotting mineral. It assists you got your thrombocytes in forming the proteins that are important in coagulation of blood or clotting of blood. It also leads to muscle cramps. So a lack of calcium, guys, you're playing sport, you need strong bones. If you want to avoid getting those cramps, you need to have lots of milk and cheese and food rich in calcium. The next mineral we're looking at is sodium, and you often see sodium, and we know sodium, we talk of sodium chloride. Sodium chloride is table salt, so that could be a source of table salt. We're looking at sodium, and so your table salt is a rich source of sodium. Cheese as well, and your meat, guys. Your meat, so it's your red meat and your white meat, so it's chicken and red meat, so it would have lots of, so your fish as well will have lots of sodium in it. What's functions of sodium? So it maintains body fluids. Its proper functioning is needed for nerve conditioning, and it also prevents muscle cramps. So it plays an important role in establishing the electrolyte balance in the muscles and preventing the onset of cramps. So again, the next mineral we're looking at is iron, and this is a micronutrient, guys. So this is essentially needed in extremely small quantities. We don't need lots of it, and we get this but lots from our diet. We eat lots of meat, eggs, and green vegetables. These are rich in as a source of iron, and they're very important. What would happen if you have too little iron in your body? If you think about people that are anemic, anemia is a result of a poor hemoglobin count, or your red blood cells having a very low hemoglobin count. Now, hemoglobin is basically the heme and the globulin. Heme is the iron and the globulin is the protein. Hemoglobin is essential for carrying oxygen in the body, as well as removing the carbon dioxide from the cells and transporting them to the lungs. So when you have a deficiency of iron, it could lead to anemia, and people that are anemic often they experience problems. They get tired very easily. They fatigued out with even simple activities So you got to have lots of iron in your diet. It's needed, as I said, it's needed for hemoglobin formation in your red blood cells, and a deficiency of this results in anemia. Let's move on and see what are some of the other. Iodine. Iodine is also a micronutrient. Again, needed in small quantities. Again, so you find that your seafoods are a rich source of iodine and your iodized salt. Guys, when you have your table salt, look at the dispenser and you'll find that the dispenser says iodized salt. So that's a rich supply of your iodine, and that is how you get your iodine. You find that seafood also is a good source of iodine. Let's look at the function of iodine. So it's needed for the formation of hormones of the thyroid gland. So you find that in grade 12, when you're looking at the endocrine system, we often look at the abnormalities of hormones, and we know that one of the hormones that rely on iodine for their production is thyroxine. And if you have a diet that is deficient in iodine, you could develop a condition known as goiter, and you probably would have seen pictures or images of this. This would be a swelling of the thyroid gland in the neck. So you find that the neck becomes extremely swollen and it protrudes out, and that is because the thyroid gland inflames up, and that condition is known as goiter. And it's a very important term. You'll need to remember this through grade 10, 11, and 12, because you'll remember we do this in grade 12 again when we do the endocrine system and deficiencies of the endocrine system. The next mineral we're looking at is phosphorus. Again, rich source from eggs, meat, milk, cheese, and your vegetables, guys. So even if you're a vegetarian, here's a good opportunity. You would be able to supplement yourselves with most of the minerals. So even vegetarians get the essential minerals that they need from their vegetarian diet. The functions: they're responsible for strong bone and teeth development. They're important in reducing and preventing muscle cramps. They store energy, and a deficiency in this as well could result in rickets or weakness. Rickets again is poor bone formation in children, and weakness generally muscle weakness, as your muscles do not develop properly or do not have enough of your essential phosphorus for development. The next mineral we're looking at is potassium, guys. Again, a rich source from meat, nuts, and bananas. And you know that potassium plays a very important role. You probably watched guys playing tennis and they have lots of bananas. Katleko, you noticed some of the guys that play tennis having bananas during their break?
Yes, during their break.
And it's because it's a rich source of potassium.
Oh, okay.
And remember that a tennis game goes on for sometimes 4 hours.
Yes.
And besides being fit, guys, your body will naturally take toll. And one of the problems that tennis players experience is that they experience cramps. And
so
cramps can be avoided by having lots of potassium in their diet.
Okay.
And that can be sustained through having a fruit like a banana.
That's interesting for all the sports players out there.
So guys, looking at, when we go into the next section, when we're looking at organic compounds, we're going to see how fruits play an important role in giving us energy, sustained energy. And that's why banana is an excellent source of that. Let's look at the functions of potassium. It maintains body fluids, so it maintains the balance in the body of body fluids. Proper functioning of the nerves. Again, you find that most of your minerals play an important function in nerve coordination and functioning. The regulation of heartbeat, and very important. Some of us don't realize this, but the heart is a muscle. Like your other muscles in the body, they need lots of potassium to maintain the electrode balance in the tissue fluid and in the cytoplasm to ensure that the muscle contracts correctly and efficiently. So a deficiency could result in weak muscles, paralysis, and what I mentioned earlier on was cramping of muscles. So we're going to go into the next slide, and I think it's time to have a break, but we're going to look at lots of questions when we get back. We have about a minute into break. We're going to break, and then we're going to get back, and we're going to look at the organic compounds, and we're going to try and unpack the 5 different organic compounds and see how they are in our daily diet and how they're important to us.
Thank you. So guys, we are going to go for a break. Get some of that water going, and I can see your stuff on the page, guys. I'm loving your interaction. Make sure you tell everyone else to join us on the page, guys. It's really awesome, and I'm having fun, so I hope you guys are having fun too. Join us after the break, guys. See you just now. Welcome back, Mindsetters. I hope you enjoyed your short break. Of course, grade 10s, you guys know that now that you're in grade 10, there's a lot more work to get through. But I know that you guys are really enjoying it because you sound really enthusiastic on the page. So one more thing I'd like to know, how is grade 10 going, guys? It's a big year for you guys. You guys are now entering that senior phase, so you know that there's so much work, but there's also so much fun. So tell me how it's going, guys. Really, I want to hear. You also want to hear, right, Jigen?
Absolutely. I think this is probably the best year. Not lots of pressure, feeling a bit of a senior, not actually a senior, so not much of
So
responsibility.
you're like in the middle.
It's a good time. Good
So
time.
do you want some questions?
Yeah, let's have those questions.
Okay, so Meli Mavuso asks, does sweat also contain fats and oils?
Okay, so when we look at sweat, guys, sweat will be largely, it'll be water, but on our skin we've got glands that produce oil. So along with sweat, you have your sebum glands that produce oil. So sweat will contain some oil droplets as it comes out through the pores, and those sebum glands or the sebaceous glands produce a bit of sweat, and that's part of sweat. Will not be an inorganic compound. It will be an organic compound that is produced by the body, but it will be part of something that is given off along with sweat. Yeah. And what was the other question?
Oscar and Katleho ask, Katleho, really cool name. They ask, what is hemoglobin?
Hemoglobin. Yeah, good question, guys. And I know it's early in the year for you, especially in grade 7. You probably would have heard this before, hemoglobin. Now, when we look at hemoglobin, when you're doing animal cells and you study blood, guys, we'll find that we've got red blood cells. Now, your red blood cells or your erythrocytes are cells that have a hemoglobin molecule on them. Hemoglobin is basically made up of an iron molecule and a protein molecule, and that's why we call that hemoglobin or globulin. That comes together and that sits in a red blood cell. So if I were to represent, I'm just going to very quickly show you, if I were to represent a red blood cell, we find that on that red blood cell we have hemoglobin molecules, and these hemoglobin molecules are important in capturing the oxygen molecules and transferring them along with the red blood cell. So the red blood cell actually has hemoglobin on them, which plays an important role in attaching the oxygen molecule, and that is how the oxygen molecules are transferred. So oxygen will attach onto a hemoglobin molecule, and that will be transferred in the bloodstream to the cells. And likewise, the carbon dioxide will also attach to the hemoglobin, and that forms carb hemoglobin, and we have oxyhemoglobin, which carries, so that's when hemoglobin has oxygen in it. So I hope that clears up the questions about what hemoglobin is. So essentially it is found on the red blood cells, and it's a protein responsible for carrying oxygen and carbon dioxide. So cool.
There's one more question if you want. Chiri asks, do I still get calcium if I cook eggs with oil, or must I eat them raw?
Well, remember that when you boil them, you still have your calcium in them. When you cook them with oil, your oil is obviously depends on what oil you use, but yes, your calcium would be present in the egg, whether you cook them or eat them raw. But often I would suggest that eating them cooked, not overcooked, not with too much of oil, would be the best way to get
Yeah, and
your
plus
calcium.
it tastes much better when it's cooked.
Cooked, yeah, absolutely. Eggs and raw eggs, guys, I don't think it might be very nutritious, but for me it doesn't go down very well. Okay, so guys, we looked at inorganic compounds before we got into the break, and I said that when we get back we're going to look at the organic compounds. So to quickly touch base, organic compounds produced in the body or by a plant through a physiological process. So it could be produced in animal tissue, it could be produced in plant tissue through a physiological process. So what are some of the organic compounds that we're going to look at today? We're going to look at carbohydrates. We said we'll look at proteins, fats, or your lipids, and we're going to look at a bit of vitamins and nucleic acids. So let's get straight into it. Carbohydrates. So carbohydrates, guys, these are organic compounds that are made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So essentially we said that the description for an organic compound is that it should contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. However, all our organic compounds contain this. How do we differentiate between them? We've got to look at the composition of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in them, along with the ratio in which the hydrogen is to oxygen, and that essentially is what differentiates the different compounds. So carbohydrates give us the most energy. So if we think about energy yielding foods, it's your carbohydrates that provides us with most of our energy. We will look at those examples of foods that are rich in carbohydrates. Okay, they also have a ratio of 2:1. So when we look at a carbohydrate, I'm going to put on a carbohydrate molecule here, C6H12O6. Katleko, you're going to take a guess at what that is. A sweet guess.
I see the C, I see the H and the O. Something to do with water, perhaps?
I said
No?
sweet guess.
Oh, sweet guess. Honey?
Sugar.
Sugar.
Okay.
Close enough.
So that's glucose. So that's glucose.
Okay.
So that's a glucose molecule. What we're talking of, the ratio for a carbohydrate is that the hydrogen to oxygen is 2:1. So when we look at the hydrogen here, there's 12 hydrogens to 6 oxygen molecules, and hence we see that this is a typical ratio for a carbohydrate, and hence we call molecules that have a ratio of C6H12O6 or hydrogen to oxygen in a ratio of 2:1 as carbohydrates. Okay. Carbohydrates also include your sugars, your starch, your simple sugars, and even cellulose. And we're going to look at your carbohydrates in plants as well. So examples of food rich in carbohydrates are rice, your bread, your potatoes, your flour, and sugar. These are foods that are rich in carbohydrates. Okay, so we know that sugar we get from plant, and that is produced by photosynthesis, as well as starch, again, produced through a physiological process, but it is a storage molecule of sugar in a plant, and that is a reserve energy molecule or reserve food kept for growth. Cellulose, again, guys, that is the structural, that makes up the cell wall in a plant. It gives the plant structural support and makes it forms the exoskeleton of a plant. So the cell wall contains high amounts of cellulose, and that essentially is very important to maintaining the shape of a plant. Glycogen, guys, in our bodies, guys, we have sugar, and that sugar is eventually stored in our body as a glycogen molecule in the muscle and liver cells. So glycogen in a human body, in the liver and muscle cells, is a storage molecule. It's a complex sugar, but it's a storage molecule of sugar in the muscles. Okay, so we're going to go down and we're going to look at the types of carbohydrates. So when we classify carbohydrates, guys, we always classify organic molecules based on the building blocks. So when we talk of a building block, we refer to the building block as a monomer. Mono meaning single. So what are carbohydrates made up? What is the essential building block? What is the smallest unit of a carbohydrate? We refer to that term as a monomer. So when we look at carbohydrates, the building blocks for carbohydrates are your monosaccharides. So the mono meaning one, and the saccharide would be a ring of carbon atoms. So we're looking at your monosaccharides being the monomers, and then we get your complex carbohydrates being made up of many monomers put together. So when we look at your carbohydrates, there are three groups or types of carbohydrates: your monosaccharides, your disaccharides, and your poly. Now the word mono means single, di would mean two, and your poly would mean many. So essentially, when we look at the types of carbohydrates, we classify them based on the number of monosaccharides they have. So when we look at the monosaccharides, the glucose. Glucose is the simplest of the monosaccharides, and that is the monomer which forms the structure in which all other carbohydrates are built. Then you have your fructose, which is also a monosaccharide, and your galactose. So we have three types of monosaccharides: glucose, fructose, and galactose. These formed the building blocks for other complex saccharides, and we refer to them now, the next group, as your disaccharides, meaning that they're made up of one glucose and one of the other monosaccharides. So let's look at the first one. When we look at maltose, maltose is two glucose molecules put together. So you've got to remember this. Remember that maltose has glucose plus glucose, and that's what maltose is. When we look at fructose, we've got to put in glucose plus a fructose molecule. So sucrose is made up of a glucose molecule, which is a monomer, plus one of the other monosaccharides, which is fructose. So, and the final and the last one is lactose, and lactose again is a disaccharide made up of glucose plus galactose. And guys, you know, often hear of people that are lactose intolerant, or milk that is lactose free, and that is essentially referring to the disaccharide that's present in milk, and often that can be purified and removed to have lactose-free milk, and this affects the digestive system of individuals that are lactose intolerant. Okay, so when they have, they cannot have milk with lactose as it upsets their tummy, and it's not good for them. When we look at polysaccharides, guys, so poly comes from the word many, and you often hear the term polysaccharides, polypeptide, meaning made up of many smaller molecules. So a polysaccharide would be in plants. Why would we have a polysaccharide? Now, your simple sugars exist, and they need to be stored as a complex form, and they use these polysaccharides to store them during unfavorable conditions for growth as reserve energy. So your starch, guys, that you see, and you know that, and a classical example of starch is potatoes, and that is a tuber that contains the reserve or the excess glucose which is stored in that organ or the tuber. So we have starch, which is a complex carbohydrate made up of many glucose molecules. Another polysaccharide is cellulose. Again, this is a plant carbohydrate, so it's found in plants, and we would not have them. So your starch and cellulose are produced in plants. What we do have, however, is glycogen, and glycogen is a complex molecule that is stored in the muscles, which is when glucose is converted into a complex molecule and stored in the muscle and liver cells as a reserve molecule, so it can be utilized when we need it.
Can we take a break again?
Okay.
Before you go on to that fantastic table.
Okay, it's time for break. So guys, we've ended this session on a sweet note. We're going to go in for the break.
Yeah, so now that there's water, now there's sugar, you guys can go make a beautiful concoction in your kitchens, but make sure that you're back right before the break ends. Okay, see you just now. Welcome back, Mindsetters. A quick reminder to you grade 10s, you guys do know that you can always interact with each other on the page, guys. You can become the closest of friends, help each other through any tests and questions and answers and everything that you need. Guys, you have each other and you have us. Together we make the full and perfect and wonderful mindset team. So make sure whenever you're struggling with something, pop by, see what's happening on the page. And of course, most of you have already checked out that website that I've posted that has everything, guys. You know, it has our schedule, it has notes, it has fantastic things, it has questions. You guys just need to pop there and see what you can find, guys. There's so much. You can actually just print it and put it on your mirror, on your door, or in your class, wherever you need it, just so that you always remember it. And those notes, I hope they're coming along well. You guys have already shown me that your notes are perfect. So hey, have fun with that. Over to you again.
Kitleko, they also say that good times go fast. We're having lots of fun. And guys, we're almost in the last session, and we've got lots still to do. But I'm going to do what's important so that next week when we do the food test, you understand what proteins are and a bit of lipids. So, and I'm sure you guys are going to do some of that work at school. So, if we do not finish, guys, remember that these notes are going to be posted and for you to interact with. There's some questions at the end, guys. If we don't get to do it, I want you guys to do those questions so that you have sort of some revision on the topic. So without further ado, let's get to proteins. So when we talk of protein, guys, we got to first again look at what the characteristics of proteins are. So when we look at proteins, guys, we see that proteins are, again, organic molecules. They contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. And that's in addition to this. So your proteins contain nitrogen. They also contain sometimes sulfur and phosphorus, which makes the variety of proteins that we have. So your sulfur and phosphorus, we saw that in our nutrients, they are a source of sulfur and phosphorus would be meat and proteins. So you find that your meat and your meat, your white meat, your red meats, all are important sources of sulfur and phosphorus. Okay, so let's look at a molecule of protein is made up of a large number of subunits called amino acids. Now you've often heard of amino acids. Now your amino acids, basically, guys, there's 20 different types of amino acids, but these are the building blocks or the monomers of proteins. So your proteins are complex molecules made up of small building blocks called amino acids. Proteins are needed for growth, repair of body tissue. And you know that, guys, when you have your proteins, they're important for development of body growth and for the development and repair of tissue. They play a very important role in this. Proteins also play a very important role in forming enzymes They produce enzymes, hormones, and even we mentioned earlier on hemoglobin. We spoke of the globulin of hemoglobin. That is a protein as well as your antibodies. We're going to we're going to look at the structure of proteins and how they're made up. And essentially, you've got to look at this. So you've got an amino acid 1, another amino acid that are put together by peptide bonds that form a dipeptide. So 2 amino acids put together form a dipeptide. If we link many amino acids together, it forms a polypeptide chain. And essentially, and that is what proteins are. Proteins are many amino acid molecules put together, held together by peptide bonds to form a complex structure. Here's some examples of some proteins. I know you guys get hungry at this time of the afternoon, but essentially you'll find that your nuts, your grains, your meats have a high source of proteins. And for those guys that are gymming, you know how important the proteins are, and these are essentially rich in amino acids. So it's not always essential that you take protein supplements, guys. We talk of eating healthy and being conscious about your diet. If you have a balanced diet, eat the correct food groups, you will be able to sustain yourself in terms of the proteins. So we've not covered the amino acids, we've not covered vitamins, we've not covered nucleic acids. These notes are included in here, guys. You got to get onto the site, you got to check this out, answer those questions. We're going to start off next week with a bit of this, and then we're going to get onto the food test. From my side, guys, have a good afternoon, but you got to stay tuned next week.
Wow, those look like really good proteins there, hey, again.
Oh yeah, it's about this time of the afternoon, evening
I know,
supper.
I'm sure everyone, those of you who are cooking for your families right now that you've seen that nice photo, now you can have ideas of what you're going to whip up, or just offer to cook for your mom, guys. Today, just give her a short break. You know, you've learned so much. Tell her what you've learned and say, listen, mom, you know what, I'm just going to do it because I've done all my homework, I've done all my notes, I am on the right track for my next lesson. Of course, Mindsetters, from us, we've had such a great show. I know that you guys really enjoyed your first live science show of the year, and I hope to see you every week, same time, same place, here with us, guys. Remember our Facebook page, facebook.com/LearnExtra, and on Twitter, guys, @LearnExtra. Make sure that you exhaust all these resources, guys. They are there for you, guys. So make sure you join us next week as well, and call all your grade 11 friends because it is now their turn. Cheers, guys. Bye.